Turns out it is not. Anybody who subscribes to the British Woodturning magazine, in the current issue is basically this entire process. The end piece looks different, but making a square hollow form. So if you want some more information, pick up the latest issue. A little bit of history on how I kind of came to this idea. So about 3 years ago, I came up with the idea I wanted to make a hollow donut out of a solid piece of wood. And that's this piece of walnut right here. This is completely hollow on the inside. So let me pass this around. You guys know that I make hollow forms for urns, for burial urns. So I'm always trying to come up with different ideas to sell. So when I did that, I thought, great. You know, I came up with something new. The old saying of there's nothing new in woodturning. Well, I thought I had done it. Then a couple weeks or a couple months later, I was on the internet and I found that there's a guy that's been doing these for a while. He calls this a torus form. It's a little bit different, but basically that's what it is. So I shelved that idea and kind of came back to it here and there, and just never really found a great way. I tried the split bowl design to come up with something. You can see it's not real perfect, but just another way to go about doing it. Then I got asked to do if I'd like to do another demo, so I thought, all right, yeah, let's revisit this, see if I can come up with a different way to do that. And the end result is my square tubes. So let me show you how I do these. To do this, you need to start with dried wood, kiln-dried wood or air-dried wood. Material does not need to be really big, depending on what your design is going to be. But, are we ready?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. But to do this, dried wood really works well. I've not tried it yet with wet wood because there is gluing involved, so I'm assuming it probably wouldn't work, although if it did, it might be kind of cool to see it kind of twist and contort as it dries. Or split. But this is more on the artistic end, so splits are artistic. To do this, so a piece of dried wood, a lathe, obviously. Tools, you need a parting tool or if it's some sort of square blunt piece, and then a bolt cutter. You need a bandsaw really helps, although you don't have to have a bandsaw. We'll get into that later. And then a screw chuck. Screw chucks work, I think, great for this because it allows you a little bit more room on the back side of the piece. So, to start the project, it's basically the same as roughing out a hole. You're going to be doing side grain, so you would knock off the corners on the bandsaw or cut it to a general round shape, drill a hole for a screw chuck, and then mount it on the lathe. So, as you can see, I've already got that. Okay. So as you can see, I've already got it mounted in the lathe. What we're going to do here in the beginning is we're just going to true everything up. There's kind of a spot here that we're going to be a little undersized, and square up the front and the back as much as you can. Okay?
A little bit more. So now that we've got this round and the two faces are pretty perpendicular, I'm just eyeballing this. We can talk a little bit about the actual dimensions and things like that. So if we go over to the board here, I've drawn up a cross section. So this is looking down through the top of the piece. The red sections obviously represent what we're trying to keep. The black sections, all the waste material. I found that it's best to kind of sketch up your design ahead of time rather than just jumping on the lathe and winging it. Even though this is more of an artistic piece, there is a little bit more technical measuring, specifically because you're trying to make a square shape or rectangle. So you want to be able to achieve specific dimensions. If you're going for square, the distance from the OD to the ID, the outside diameter to the inside diameter, needs to be approximately the same as the width of the piece. If you're going for a rectangle, then it is whatever it is. So for this, right now we're about just shy of 1 3/4 inches wide. There will be a saw kerf in here, so it's going to come out a little bit less than 1 3/4 inches. So say we'll shoot for 1.5 inches. So that's what I want to establish here on the front face. Now that I've established where my inside diameter is going to be, and since do we have the camera? Oh, the cameras are working. Okay. If anybody wants to come up and look at any point, just feel free. I'm going to grab my parting tool and I'm going to establish that. I'm going to start that inside dimension. My first cut here, I'm going to be a little conservative. I'm not going to go right to the line, just because when we're all done, we may need to come back in and true that up a little bit due to tear out and things like that. And you can see I'm being very purposeful in the positioning of my tool to make sure that I'm parallel to the lathe. I'm trying to keep all my cuts nice and straight. So I've just opened that up a little bit, just giving myself a little bit of room. Now what we need to do is we need to establish our wall thickness, and we'll do that on the outside diameter. So our wall thickness is going to be 1/8 inch. That's what we're shooting for. You've got, you're going to be cutting this front wall off. That's kind of the secret of doing this. So you're cutting this front wall off, or this disc, which allows you to get to the inside to hollow everything out. Okay? I'm going to open this up a little bit more, and I'm going to take my parting tool and go maybe about halfway through the piece. Okay, so now that we've done that, we've got our wall thickness established. We've started roughing out the inside of the donut form. I want to get some sort of a line here on the OD so that we can rematch up our grain once we've cut this loose. So just something like that. All right? Now at this stage we're ready to cut the disc off. There's two ways that you can do this. The bandsaw, obviously, which I prefer, and or a parting tool. You could do it all right here on the lathe. The drawbacks to the parting tool is, in order to make this work correctly, you don't want to remove a lot of wood. So you're probably going to use a thin parting tool. And you can see the evidence on this that there is a lot of heat that's generated. The reason that happens is because obviously you're cutting a pretty deep part. The other reason is to do this cut, you need to be able to plunge completely perpendicular in and all in one cut. Not all at once. You go a little bit, pull it out, let it cool off. But you cannot open up that kerf like you would on when you're normally parting something off, because then you're going to open up both pieces. You're going to lose material, so that when you glue this back together, it's not going to fit. So, hence the reason I go with the bandsaw. The other problem with the parting tool, and this is really the biggest issue, is it generates so much heat, and this is a very thin piece. What I found actually on my black piece there, that was the first one I did, I parted it off, set it aside, hollowed everything out. About an hour later, went to glue it back on, and that disc had curled up like a potato chip. So it made it extremely difficult to put back in place. So the bandsaw just is a little bit cooler and a little bit more controllable. Okay? It's just tough with the microphone. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to remove the piece from the screw chuck and head over to the bandsaw. You can leave it on the chuck. You can take the whole chuck assembly over, but if you've got your screw in your chuck running true, you really shouldn't need to. It can only be screwed back on one way, so when we put it back on, everything should be running true. Now the jig that I have made up for this project, it's just pretty simple, just all scrap wood. The key is that what you're trying to achieve, obviously, is kind of like at the grocery store cutting a piece of lunch meat off, but just one really thick piece. And you want everything to be nice and parallel so that you waste very little wood. All right? So we've got a V cradle set up on here. And then a backing plate that helps me keep the round piece square and vertical and parallel to the blade. Then I've got a secondary piece. It's just a piece of scrap wood that I can use to kind of hold the piece on the inside of the blade and keep my fingers away from the blade. Okay? All right. I've made just the one jig so that it fits this exact piece that I'm doing. If I was to go with a wider piece, I would need to change the jig around. In fact, I made this jig for my saw at home, figuring it would be the same here, and it was not, so I had to do a little modifying. It's going to cut a little bit thicker of a piece off than what I would normally do, but it is what it is.
but it'll work. Alright, now what I want to do with this, it hasn't gotten a lot of heat, but it's still going to distort some. Where's the blanks for the lead class?
Oh, how many?
I just need two of them so I can kind of set it on there. So I'll set that on the bench. Any bench will help to draw some of the heat out and put something on top of it.
Bandsaw cut a little bit crooked. We're going to have to true this up. And you can see a lot of this is just eyeballing the shape. So now that I've got that trued up again, I want to establish two new lines. And what we're looking for here is trying to think how I want to draw this. The OD wall thickness and the ID wall thickness. All right, so again, we're shooting for 1/8 of an inch. And remember, we were a little bit conservative on the inside, so it's going to be a little bit thicker. And just like before, we're going to grab the parting tool and we're going to establish the inside of those two lines. Once you've done that, then bowl gouge, and now you're just doing simple bowl turning. You're just going to get all that extra material out of there as best you can. You do want to be careful when you're doing this because you're making some kind of odd cuts, especially the cut on the outside diameter of the inner wall. So you're cutting straight in this way, and you obviously you don't want to poke through the back. This cut is just your basic bowl cut on this side, but again, it's a little bit difficult because you're kind of pinched between two walls. So if you have different size bowl gouges, a smaller one might sometimes be a little bit easier. Or You can do this entire hollowing process with a parting tool or badan or box scraper or something like that. The reason I don't is because the deeper you go and the thinner these walls are, it starts to make a lot of noise. So you may want to have some hearing protection when you get to this point. Okay? And check your depth often. So you guys can hear, yeah, it gets pretty noisy. I've about got as much as I can with the bowl gouge, so I'm going to have to finish the rest off with my parting tool. And we need to remember, whatever this width is, we need to subtract 1/8 of an inch to leave the back wall. So we're shooting for a little over 1.25 inches, and we're about 7/8 right now. You should definitely do that. Yeah, I think a scraper would be a little grabby at this point. Maybe a different type of wood, or maybe I'm going to adjust the speed a little bit now. You can slow down your feed or speed up your feed, play around with that, and it can make that noise a little bit less. And we've still got our outside wall is pretty good. I've got a little bit of an angle on the inside wall, so we're gonna kind of adjust that. I also need to be wary of this spot that didn't clean up 100%, so I'm not going to go probably till the full 1/8 inch wall thickness depth, because I'm afraid I might poke through there. Okay, no more torture. So there we go. That's hollowed out. Now at this stage, obviously, you would want to sand it. It all depends on what your finished design is going to be, and we'll talk about the design in a little bit. But if you're going for that particular shape, obviously where you can actually see inside of it, then you want to sand it pretty well. Or when you get to this stage, if it's square or rectangle, it's very easy to make sanding strips to get in there and just sand the area that you can actually see. So you don't have to get too crazy. The outside obviously needs to be sanded and look good. Unless you're texturing, then yes. This is a heavy eighth. The back wall I'm pretty close to. I'm probably about 3/16. But I would want to shoot for 1/8 of an inch. Obviously, with any kind of wood turning, the thinner, the more wows you get. So since you can see inside of it, 1/8 of an inch is a good thickness. You also have to consider that this is going to be a glue joint surface, so you need some amount of width to absorb the glue. All right, at this stage, we are ready now to sand the glue joint and then actually glue the piece back on. We're not going to do the gluing today just for time constraints, but I have another piece that's already glued up and ready to go. You want to make sure that your glue joint is flat, so we would do a little bit of sanding on there, also with the mating piece. The mating piece, the disc, is a little bit more difficult to sand, obviously because of the shape and the thickness. So, and it's probably has curled somewhat. So a random orbital sander, anything just to make it smooth. And then when you clamp it into place, the clamping will kind of take up the contours. Yes? Yeah, if you have a drum sander, yeah, absolutely. I have a benchtop belt sander, so I just kind of run it across there real quick. Smooth is what you're looking for. If I'm going to sand that glue joint, I'm usually going 150 to 200, somewhere in there. So it makes it. The whole point is to make this glue joint disappear. And then obviously if you're texturing it or painting it or staining it, you have a little bit more leeway. If you're going to leave this as raw, clear-coated, finished wood, then you want to make your joint as good as possible. Okay? So, a trick to gluing up. Good. That stayed really flat. Is anybody here familiar with the website called Pinterest? 2, 3. Okay. For those of you who aren't, Pinterest is an online website where you can create your own personal bulletin board. So, like this, online. There's millions of people out there just like us, professionals, hobbyists, everything, where they just post pictures or do things of inspiration, and you can take those ideas and put them on your board so that you can go back and look at them whenever you want. Pinterest. So the reason I bring this up is, for woodworkers especially, woodworkers and woodturners, there is a ton of us out there. And I have boards for each that just give me inspiration, ideas, and things like that. I highly recommend it. And you can come up with some great ideas, tips on how to do things. So this is a tip that somebody had posted just in a general woodworking forum, probably from Family Handyman or something like that. But it works really well for this, for segmented turning and things like that. It's basically PVC pipe. This is schedule 40 that you've cut into little rings, and then you've put a split. So this makes a nice little C-clamp. Super lightweight, costs about 2 pennies and maybe 10 seconds worth of time. So let me show you how these work. Obviously it's already sanded and everything, and I'm lining up my grain line that I put on before. That's it. It's that simple. And seriously a lot of strength here. You can adjust that strength. Obviously, you cut out a little bit more, make it a little weaker or thinner. But, you know, for a piece of scrap that I had laying around in my shop, this works great. And so you get 4 on there. I use 8 total. And you can actually see, you can push and see, okay, there's a little bit of movement. I need another clamp there, another one there, so on and so forth. Okay? So that's that to that stage. Before I take this off and switch to the next stage, there's one thing that you want to do at this point. This waste block on the inside is not actually a waste block. We're going to turn a tenon on here so that when we part the full donut form off, you've got a nice little bowl blank when you're all done. So this is a 2-for-1 project. So this is using a skew the way it's meant to be used. Okay, so now that we've got our pieces all dried, we've got the clamps all off of it, now obviously we need to do a little truing up of the surfaces. And then we're going to establish and deepen our separation between the waste block and the actual donut form. Now, obviously, I want to be careful, especially on the OD, because I know this one is 1/8 of an inch. So I don't want to take too much material off, just enough to true it up, and my disc was a little bit off center, so I need to just true that up a little bit. One of my favorite 50-degree tools, works really well. Sometimes you just can't get the shape, or especially on something where you want it flat, comes in very handy. Okay, so there we are done. Now we need to start the process of actually parting this donut off from the whole piece. Now, if you remember in the beginning, when we first established this inside dimension, I was a little bit conservative. So I know that I've got material, but I know once I true up the outer disc and it's even or flush with everything else that's in the inside, I know I don't have much more room. Maybe another 1/16 that I can take off of the inside. Okay? Okay. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we are going to continue with this little bit of parting from this direction. And then we're going to, just about halfway, and then we're going to flip it around, grab it with the 4 jaws, and we're going to finish parting it from the other side. You can part it off completely from this side, but I found that it's going to create a lot of tear out on the back side. Tear out, a lot of sanding, blah, blah, blah. Again, if you're going to texture it, maybe it doesn't really matter. But so it's nice to do half the cut from this side, half the cut from the other side, kind of meet in the middle. Yes. Right, yeah. And you actually don't have to... You know, once this is completely parted off and you just have this donut, you can re-chuck it back up if you've got a Longworth chuck or cold jaws or even a jam chuck, and then you can turn it back and forth, whatever you need to do. No, I actually made that 1/8 of an inch and then decided to texture it, so it was a little risky. While that's going, let's talk a little bit about design. So I've chosen to my first piece was square, and I've chosen to show you guys the square piece first. Because I feel that the square shape or rectangle is the easiest. It's all just basic tools, straight cuts. You can almost eyeball the whole thing. I'm hoping that a lot of you, or some of you at least, are seeing that the potential here. Square is just the basic. You can do round, you can do triangle, octagon. I even thought, God, you could make this profile any shape. You could make it the silhouette of the state of Ohio if you want. The tough thing is, whatever you turn on the outside, you have to be able to turn on the inside to maintain that wall thickness. So let's talk about round as an example. If we were to go for this same design but make it round, so kind of like that big walnut piece that's going around the room, you would either have to do it like I did that, or to achieve this kind of thing, to make it easier, you would have to split it right down the middle. So you basically make 2 halves. And you're going to separately chuck them and separately hollow them, and then put the 2 halves together to glue them up. Everybody follow me? And the reason being, obviously, is because with the square you have one whole side you can cut off. With round, if you cut off one side, it's not really going to achieve what you want. The way I did that big piece was I actually cut a wedge out of one side. And if you guys looked at it, you probably saw there was a spot where I had cut this piece out. And then I went inside with hollowing tools and I hollowed it all out. It probably doesn't, from a hollowing standpoint, probably doesn't look really good if you were to cut it apart. I know some areas are real thin and some areas are real thick, but come on, it's a tough shape to get in there. What I found, luckily I did cut the wedge when this whole circular shape was about 1/4 of an inch bigger all around. And the reason is because of your parting tool. When you make these two parting cuts, you're removing a pretty substantial amount of wood. And what I found when I went back to glue it all up, that wedge went in deeper than, so I had cut it, it was bigger. When I glued it in, it was smaller. So then I had to return the whole outside to blend everything in. So yeah, so you can see now why on these tube forms it pays to draw everything out to scale or to full size ahead of time, so that you can think through the whole process before you run into problems. Other shapes like we talked about, triangular shapes and things like that, the sky's the limit. You can really do anything you want. And then the overall shape, we'll talk about that a little later. You can do anything you want. This is where the kind of the artistic side of things comes into play. All right? Okay, I'm pretty well blended in to the inside dimension here. So I need to finish going a little bit deeper on my parting through cut, and then we can turn it around. Now at this stage, the form is getting thin, it's getting a little bit more delicate. So especially when you're taking it off the screw chuck there, you want to be a little bit more careful. Okay, now we'll need to make this measurement of where our inside dimension is, and then we're going to transfer that to the front and make our parting cut. Obviously, accuracy counts. I don't want to screw it up at this point, so I'm not too worried. You could face off the backside to smooth it out, but like I said, I can always put this in a pair of cold jaws and remanipulate it however I need.
Alright, so now cool stuff. So now we get to decide what we actually want to do with this hollow donut. And obviously, like we talked about before, I mean, that's just whatever I came up with. Kind of artistic, maybe you like it, maybe you don't. But there's so many things that can be done at this point. This could be, my original design for that was to cut out that 90-degree wedge, and then it would sit like this, more like a U shape. The design is wherever your imagination can take you. And you can imagine if you've done a different profile, this could be cut up into 50 skinny little segments, stacked all back together into any shape that you want. If you can envision a slinky, any shape that you can make with a slinky, you could do with one of these. Bigger diameter, even smaller, skinnier, all the different shapes. So I'm really kind of excited about this, and I hope that you guys give this a try, because I'd like to see what everybody else can come up with. This is just scratching the surface. So, let's go ahead and cut it apart.
Hey, who has the microphone? Okay, so you can see, I mean, just with a square form, if everybody can see that, I think that's pretty cool. And again, going back to my hollow forms, anything that I can come up with, another way to hold ashes and things like that, is just great. My original idea was to go with this shape and then make a cap for each end and then do a threaded finial in each side. This one, if you've achieved a perfect square on the outside, you can obviously go with the shape that I did on my black piece. This can be turned, which I actually did hit size. So this could actually be done in any configuration. It's just your imagination is all you need at this point. Texturing and all sorts of stuff. So, for this particular one, I'm going to show you guys how, because I'm sure the question is, well, how do you glue up those two odd shapes? Yes? No question. Okay. Oh, so the ID. So, again, I would put this back in the lathe, either in a jam chuck or cold jaw or something like that, and then you can turn the whole inside. Or if you have a sanding drum for your drill press, anything you can do to just clean that up. Yeah, when I did my first couple, I hit that a little bit better. So, all right. So let's go through how I actually glue that up. Okay, back to the website Pinterest. This is another idea I got off of there. So I know there's a lot of segmented turners in here that probably already know this technique, but hot melt glue is a wonderful temporary, non-damaging way to stick things together. What we will be doing is, because this is an odd shape, there's no real way to get squeeze clamps and things like that on there. So we're going to make a way to actually clamp these two things together. And all you need is hot melt glue, a couple pieces of scrap wood, and some rubber bands. We will hot melt glue one of these little ears to each side of the joint, and then use rubber bands to actually hold it together. surprisingly strong and, of course, very easy. So this whole process is really easy. The nice thing about the hot melt glue is once it cools down to a certain temperature, which you have a few seconds, it does not seep into the wood like our CA glue or regular wood glue will do. So it stays pretty well on the surface. So when we're done, and this has all been glued up with actual wood glue, these little ears that we've hot melt glued on, they just pop right off with like a pair of pliers or something like that. And very little damage to the wood surface itself. Yeah, I do both sides so it gets nice even pressure. And then obviously we've also gone and we've flat sanded the glue joint so it's nice and tight, and again, you can't see it. I think that the really cool part about this kind of a project is, it kind of confuses everybody, especially people who don't know wood turning, and even people who do wood turning, when I tell them that 90% of the work is done on the lathe, and they just can't fathom how I did that. The cheapest stuff. Yeah, just Joann Fabrics or Michaels. I think it's like $2 or $3 for a 25 pack. And I didn't have any problems with the ones that I've done. If it does damage the wood, you still have some thickness here, so you can go back and sand it if need be. Not really. just a big glob and squish the ear in there. So yeah, so if you use something like, I would imagine, oak, it would penetrate a little bit deeper. And I know that there is, Woodcraft and Craft Supplies sell the higher end hot melt glue guns and glue, and I know there's all different types. That's what my wife had, so that's what I used, and it worked. So straight, the removal of the ears, just to show you how easy it is. And very little, there's just a little bit of the glue residue, and that'll sand right off, and you're back to clean wood. Okay? All right, so last thing I wanted to talk about with this is just an idea that I have for this. I'm going to cut this into 4 segments, so they'll come out just like this. And I'm going to cap the bottom and cap the top, and maybe change the opening angle a little bit, so that these will be 4 little miniature boxes. Just to give you guys another idea of something you can do. It doesn't have to stay a big piece. You can cut this up into anything that you want. So, all right, any other questions? Then that concludes my demo on hollow form tubes.